Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, scholars and dignitaries, welcome to another episode. Welcome to my world. Hello friends. So as you know, I've done a number of videos on the harms of marijuana, the harms to mind, body, and spirit, the harms to families and society as well. But most of the studies I reported on were based on studies of youth or young adults. Some were specific to women, and some were topic-specific videos about marijuana. But now we have one of the first studies about marijuana use and the elderly. But a quick note before we begin. Generally speaking, the elderly have had greater impact from the use of all drugs, especially the potency of drugs, than younger users, and have experienced greater levels of both adverse effects and serious adverse effects. In fact, there's a particular diagnostic category of alcoholism called, quote, late onset alcoholism, where people might drink alcohol at the same level and pattern all their lives, but all of a sudden at a later age they now develop chronic alcoholism. And of course this may hold true for other drugs and marijuana as well. Older adults are at higher risk for adverse cannabis reactions, likely due to both a combination of greater sensitivity to pharmacological substances as well as to the newer forms and potency of the drug. Emergency rooms have reported that the elderly present themselves with dizziness and falls, heart palpitations, panic attacks, confusion, anxiety, worsening of underlying lung diseases such as asthma or COPD, and even cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome or cyclic vomiting. It can include neurological disorders such as cognitive dysfunction, behavioral problems, memory problems, attention deficiency, and even structural and functional changes in the brain. And the American Heart Association statement said that people who use cannabis may be at risk of sudden death, heart attack, arrhythmia, and stroke, illnesses for which the elderly are more vulnerable. Of course, there are social effects too. For instance, cannabis use in the elderly can interfere with the ability to perform daily tasks, such as driving a car, because cannabis impairs one's abilities such as depth perception, divided attention, and reaction time, which may already be a problem with aging in general. And of course it includes the variety of cannabis use disorders outlined in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual beyond simple cannabis intoxication, both acute and chronic effects. Now, we know that marijuana use has been increasing among older adults in the United States, and to a great extent, a primary reason is because society, and especially the marijuana industry, along with government support, is suggesting that cannabis use can help alleviate chronic symptoms experienced by the elderly. But the truth is that these claims have never been tested, and a more serious concern yet is that no one has explained or documented the adverse effects, the unintended consequences related to either medicinal or recreational use by the elderly. So this study was to examine increased acute healthcare utilization by the elderly related to their use of marijuana, and it sought to do that by examining trends in cannabis-related visits to the emergency departments by senior citizens in California. According to the report published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society called, quote, Trends in Emergency Department Visits Associated with Cannabis Use Among Older Adults in California, the study showed a very serious and unexpected finding. The authors of the study examined data from 2005 through 2019 to determine the cannabis-related admissions to hospital emergency rooms in California hospitals for seniors ages 65 and over. And then they estimated the changes in overall cannabis-related visit rates and by cannabis-related diagnostic codes. They found that the cannabis-related ED visits rates increased significantly for adults ages 65 and over. The overall rate increased from 20 per 100,000 visits in 2005 to 395 per 100,000 visits in 2019, which was a 1,800% relative increase. This was for both blacks and whites, and for men and women. The authors concluded that cannabis-related emergency department visits are increasing among older adults in California, and we know soon to be followed throughout the rest of the country, and are a direct consequence of the adverse effects of cannabis use. And I believe that this is just the beginning. One other study showed that from 9 to 30% of cannabis users can become cannabis dependent. And now with more elderly using it than ever before, we have a whole new population vulnerable to these effects, as well as the other personal and social harms. The authors concluded with advice that healthcare workers should now always inquire about cannabis use, even for the elderly, and they should now provide education about its use as a part of routine medical care for older adults. Hey, be safe, be well, and stay away from marijuana use, no matter what your age. And may God bless you and your family.